Hi. Today we will be watching a psychological thriller/horror movie, Hereditary. If you spook easily, you are in for a ride. Annie is a miniature artist. She recently got a project for an office miniature, but instead she spends most of her time making a model of her own house. She carefully captures and ensures all the small details of her house. She even made miniatures of all of her family members and her mother who had just passed away. Making a miniature of someone who died is a little creepy, right? Annie and her family go to attend the funeral of her mom Alan, who had just passed away. She said a few words about her mother. There at the funeral, the family spotted a lot of people whom they had never met before. They claimed to be Alan's friends. She was a very mysterious woman. Alan's dead body is wearing a locket with a very unique sign. Keep this sign in mind as it is related to the story. Annie's daughter Charlie was sketching disturbing drawings in her book and making very weird sounds. Her father stopped her, but she did not seem to care. All the family paid their respects and came back home. The family did not seem very bothered by the whole ordeal, except Charlie, who was closest to her grandmother and was very sad. Alan even fought with Annie to let her feed Charlie when she was a baby. Yuck. The only wish Alan had was for Charlie to be a boy. We will know the reason at the end. Annie kissed her daughter goodnight and made her way towards the store where she found a book that belonged to her mother. There was a note that said, "All the sacrifices they made will be worth it." Annie puts the book down, and as she is leaving the room she sees her mother in the corner. She switches on the lights quickly, but there was no one there. Charlie is a very unusual girl. She is always making something or sketching something. She doesn't have a lot of friends, and I think we both know why. She is literally cutting the head off of a bird here. Annie also has a son named Peter who is somewhat normal. He is always under the influence of weed, which is why his body language is so wobbly. And he also self-medicates to absorb the darkness his house has. To cope with her trauma, Annie secretly goes to a grief group meeting. She talks about how her mother Alan had mental issues and she projected that onto her daughter. She wanted to put someone else in her body. Both of them never really had a bond. Annie also reveals that her older brother had killed himself when he was 16. That night Peter was invited to a party. He lied to his mom about it being a school event, which is why she forced him to take his younger sister with him so that Charlie could make some friends. Peter had no choice. Both he and Charlie are on their way to the party. They pass a wooden pole, which has the same sign as Alan's locket, if you remember. Peter doesn't want his little sister hanging around with him, so he tells her to stay there and find something to pass her time. He goes off to get high with his friends, leaving Charlie. She eats a slice of chocolate cake, but soon her throat starts swelling up. She is allergic to the nuts that were in the cake. She finds Peter and tells him about it. He picks her up and they rush to the hospital. Peter is under extreme influence of marijuana and tries his best to drive properly. Charlie was suffocating in the car, so she rolls down the window and puts her head out to be able to breathe. Peter stops her, but as he looks to the front there are animals. He quickly turns the steering. Charlie's head hits the pole. The hit was so extreme that her whole head got disassociated from her body. He stops the car, but it is too late now. He is in a state of total shock here and doesn't know what to do. He simply drives the car and comes home. Goes to bed without telling anyone the horrible incident that had happened. The next morning Annie finds Charlie's body in the car. She shouts and cries in pain for her daughter. They bury Charlie. This was all very disturbing to watch. After this the whole family got extremely depressed. They didn't talk to each other and days passed like this. Annie went back to her group meeting where she met a woman named Joan. Joan told her that her son and grandson had passed away. She gives Annie her number and tells her to call if she needs her. At home, it is getting hard for Peter to cope with Charlie's death. He starts seeing her in his room and gets scared. Annie meets Joan and talks to her about her life. She also tells her that she sleepwalks and that when Peter and Charlie were little, she tried to kill them in their sleep. Annie was at home, making her miniature art. She was carving the scene of her daughter's death, how her head had fallen off near the pole and her headless body was sitting in the car. Her husband Steve sees this and finds it very disturbing. He lets her know how this is not appropriate and she should stop. I agree with him here, to be honest. What about you? That night at dinner, the family had a very ugly fight. They are growing more and more distant now.
Fucking face on your face!
Annie was out getting some stuff when she met Joan, who told her that she had performed a ritual that helped her contact her dead son. She showed Annie how to do it, and Annie could feel someone's presence in her surroundings too. Annie gets freaked out from this and starts crying. Joan calms her down and gives her a paper with all the instructions for the ritual. Back at home, Annie wakes up to see a trail of ants. She follows it and finds out they are eating Peter's face. When he wakes up, all of the ants are gone. Annie says horrible things to him like she never wanted to be his mother, and he makes her sick. Both of them started crying, and suddenly Annie wakes up. This was all just a bad dream. Annie wakes Peter and Steve up to perform the ritual with them. She uses Charlie's sketchbook to set up a spiritual connection. As she starts the ritual, the air around them gets cold and the glass moves forward. Annie starts talking like Charlie, and this creeps Peter out, who starts crying in horror. Steve throws a glass of water on Annie, which makes her come back to her senses. In class, Peter suddenly sees a ray of light that surrounds the room. He sees his reflection, in which his expressions are joyfully creepy. Over at the house, Annie follows a disgusting smell and finds it to be her daughter's dead body with the same sign. Peter hears the clicking and raises his hand. He starts bashing his head in on the table and shouts in dread when he comes back to his senses. He starts seeing horrible nightmares and visions and often cries. Annie calms her son down and tells him that all of it was just a dream. She goes through Charlie's sketchbook and finds Peter's face drawn with his eyes crossed out. She decides to burn the book, but as soon as the book catches fire, her arm also does. She tries to pat it down, but it is no use. The fire only goes out when she pulls the book out. Annie rushes to Joan's place, who isn't there. Her house is filled with candles and the same symbol. She has also kept a picture of Charlie with all her things. And Peter's too, surrounded by more candles. So weird, right? Annie rushes home and goes through her mom's box, where she finds a book about King Paimon. He is the god of mischief and targets the most vulnerable people. He always preyed on the male bodies. Steve brought Peter home and was also very upset from the state of his house. Annie finds Steve and tells him all about what she had recently discovered. She gives him Charlie's notebook and asks him to burn it, so that Annie would die and all their problems would be gone. Steve refuses, and Annie takes the book from him and throws it in the fire. This time, instead of Annie, Steve is caught on fire. She starts crying, but there is the same ray of light and her expressions suddenly change. Instead of being upset, she is now okay with what has happened. Peter wakes up. There is someone crawling on the wall behind him. He goes downstairs and finds his father's body burnt to ashes. Annie is possessed and starts running after Peter. He goes to hide in the attic and shuts the door. She bangs her head again and again against it. Peter looks at the floor and sees his picture surrounded by candles. In the air, Annie is cutting her own head off. Peter jumps out the window and falls to the ground. The same light fixates on him. Annie's headless body goes up the treehouse. Peter also follows her. He finds a Paimon statue in the treehouse with Charlie's head on it. Peter is made to wear a crown. His body has been taken over by Paimon, and at the end we see everyone kneeling to him. I hope you liked this movie. I will see you in my next video.
Bye!